Okay, I have never told this story publicly before. For years, I only told two people what happened, my older sister and the police officer who arrived at our house the next morning. My sister believes me. The officer did not. I cannot really blame him. Had someone else told me this story, I probably would have assumed they were exhausted, confused, or remembering things incorrectly. But I know what I saw. More importantly, I know what I heard. This happened in November of 2021, when I was 23 years old. At the time, I was living with my mother in the house where I had grown up. It was an old two-story home outside a small town in western Pennsylvania. The property sat at the end of a narrow road with only 3 other houses nearby. Behind our backyard was a wooded hillside that stretched for miles. There was nothing especially unusual about the house. It creaked when the temperature changed. The pipes made noise. Mice sometimes got into the basement during winter. Normal problems for an old rural house. My father had died 2 years earlier, and my older sister had already moved to Philadelphia, so it was just my mother and me living there. My mother worked as a night nurse at a rehabilitation center about 40 minutes away. Her schedule changed from week to week, but she usually left around 6 in the evening and returned sometime after 7 the following morning. I worked remotely, which meant I spent a lot of nights alone in the house. That had never bothered me. Our town was quiet, and I knew every sound the house made. I knew the low groan from the furnace when it started. I knew which stair squeaked. I knew the tapping noise the maple tree made against my bedroom window when the wind came from the east. I also knew the sound of my mother arriving home. Her car had a loose heat shield that rattled whenever she turned into the driveway. She always struggled with the front door lock, dropped her bag on the bench in the hallway, and called my name before taking off her shoes. She followed the same routine every morning. That is why I knew something was wrong as soon as I heard her come home that night. It was shortly after 11. I was upstairs in my bedroom, watching a movie on my laptop while finishing some work. My mother had left for her shift around 5:30. I had watched her drive away. At approximately 11:06, I heard the front door open downstairs. There was no sound from her car, no rattle in the driveway, no headlights passing across my bedroom wall, just the door opening. At first, I assumed she had forgotten something and driven home in one of her coworkers' cars. Then I heard her voice. "Daniel?" She called from the hallway. Her voice sounded tired, which was normal after work. I removed one of my earbuds. "Yeah?" I called back. There was no response. I waited a few seconds, expecting to hear her bag hit the bench. Instead, I heard the front door close very slowly. Then the lock turned. "Mom, I'm home," she said. Something about the way she said it made me uncomfortable. There was nothing obviously wrong with her voice. It sounded exactly like my mother, but she spoke each word separately. "I'm home." I closed my laptop and stepped into the upstairs hallway. The lights downstairs were still off. From where I stood, I could see part of the entryway and the bottom of the staircase. "Why are you home early?" I asked. She did not answer. I heard her shoes moving across the wooden floor, slowly, one step at a time. Then she walked into view at the bottom of the stairs. It looked like my mother. She was wearing her dark blue winter coat and carrying her red work bag. Her brown hair was tied behind her head, but she was standing in the darkness, looking up at me without turning on the hall light. I could not clearly see her face. "What happened?" I asked. She tilted her head slightly. Then she smiled. Even in the darkness, I could see that. "Nothing happened," she said. "Come downstairs." My mother would never say that. She would complain about driving home. She would explain why she had left work. She would ask why I was still awake. Instead, she just stood there. "Are you sick?" "No." "Did they send you home?" "No." "Then why are you here?" Her smile disappeared. "I live here." I remember feeling embarrassed by how frightened those words made me. Of course she lived there. I told myself she was tired or upset about something at work. I reached for the switch at the top of the stairs. Before I touched it, she said, "Leave it off." Her voice was sharper now. I stopped. "Why?" "The light hurts my eyes." She remained at the bottom of the stairs. There was a lamp on a table less than 2 feet from her. She could have turned it on herself. I noticed that she still had her coat buttoned all the way to her neck. Her work bag hung from her right hand, but it did not look heavy. Usually it was full of folders, food containers, and medical supplies. That night, it hung flat, empty. "Come downstairs," she said again. I did not move. "Mom, turn on the light." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she reached toward the lamp. Her arm moved strangely, not in an impossible way. It just seemed too slow and deliberate, like someone consciously controlling every part of the movement. Her hand passed over the switch. The lamp did not turn on. She lowered her arm. "It's broken," she said. I knew it was not broken. I had used it earlier that evening. I stepped backward into my bedroom. Her head followed me, but the rest of her body remained completely still. "I'm calling you," I said. I took out my phone and selected my mother's number. Her ringtone immediately began playing downstairs. The sound came from inside the red work bag. For a moment, I felt relieved. Obviously, it was her. She had her phone. The explanation was probably simple. Then someone answered my call. "Daniel?" My mother's voice came through my phone. Behind it, I could hear people talking, medical equipment beeping, and an announcement playing over a speaker. She was still at work. "Mom?" I whispered. "What's wrong?" The figure at the bottom of the stairs lowered its head. I stared at it. My mother continued speaking through the phone. "Daniel, are you there?" I could barely breathe. "Where are you?" I asked. "At work. Where else would I be?" The woman downstairs started walking toward the stairs. I heard her place one foot on the first step. The wood creaked. "Someone is in the house," I whispered. She stopped moving. "What?" "There's someone downstairs." My mother's voice became serious immediately. "Go into your room and lock the door." The figure lifted its face toward me. I could now see her more clearly. It still looked like my mother, but the smile had returned. "Daniel," it said from downstairs. My mother said my name through the phone at the exact same time. The two voices overlapped perfectly. I ran into my bedroom and locked the door. My mother told me to call the police. I asked her to stay on the phone, but she said she needed to alert security at her workplace and call my sister. Before disconnecting, she made me promise not to leave the room. I called 911. As I explained what was happening, I heard the figure begin climbing the stairs. It did not hurry. Each step creaked beneath its weight. The dispatcher asked if I knew the person. I told her it looked like my mother, but that my mother was 40 miles away. There was a long silence on the line. Then she asked whether I had taken any drugs or medication. I told her no. The footsteps reached the upstairs hallway. They stopped outside my bedroom. I moved away from the door and picked up the aluminum baseball bat I kept beside my desk. The dispatcher told me officers were on their way. Someone gently knocked. 3 quiet taps. "Daniel?" My mother's voice said from the other side, "Open the door." I did not answer. "You're confused," it continued. "I came home early." I held the phone close to my ear. The dispatcher asked if the intruder was trying to enter. "No," I whispered. "It's just standing outside." The doorknob moved, once to the right, then to the left. "It's locked," the thing said. The way it said those words terrified me. There was no frustration in its voice. It sounded almost pleased. "I know you called someone," it continued. "You shouldn't have done that." The dispatcher heard it. I know she did because her tone changed immediately. She told me to move something heavy in front of the door. I pushed my desk against it as quietly as I could. While I moved the desk, the thing outside began scratching the door. Not pounding, not trying to break through, just dragging something sharp down the wood. From the top to the bottom, slowly. Then it stopped. I waited. The hallway was silent. The dispatcher said the officers were about 8 minutes away. I walked toward the bedroom window. My room was on the second floor, but there was a small roof over the back porch below it. I started thinking about climbing out. Then I heard my closet door creak. I turned around. The door was slightly open. I was certain it had been closed before. I stared at the dark gap between the door and the frame. Something inside the closet whispered my name. I nearly dropped the phone. It sounded like my father. Not a vague imitation, not just a man with a similar voice. It sounded exactly like him. Danny? Only my father had called me Danny. He had been dead for 2 years. "Daniel?" the dispatcher said. "What's happening?" I could not answer. The closet door opened another inch. My father's voice whispered again. "Help me." At the same moment, the thing in the hallway started knocking. My mother's voice outside the bedroom. My father's voice inside the closet, both calling me. I moved toward the window. The closet door opened wider. I could not see anyone inside, but something was breathing behind my hanging clothes. I unlocked the window and pushed it open. Cold air rushed into the room. The noise in the closet stopped. So did the knocking. Then my mother's voice spoke from beneath the window. "Don't come outside." I looked down. The backyard was almost completely dark. Someone was standing near the tree line, a woman wearing my mother's blue coat. She was looking up at me. That meant there were at least two of them, one outside my bedroom door, another in the backyard. The woman beneath the window raised one arm and waved. Her hand moved too quickly, back and forth, like footage being played at the wrong speed. The dispatcher kept asking me questions, but I barely heard her. The figure in the yard stopped waving. It pointed toward the woods. There, between the trees, I saw more people, at least 6. They stood far apart from one another. I could only make out their shapes, but some appeared to be wearing light-colored clothes. One was very small, child-sized. Another was unusually tall. None of them moved. I shut the window and locked it. The thing outside the bedroom door began laughing. It used my mother's voice at first, then my father's, then my sister's. Finally, it laughed in my own voice. The closet door flew open. There was nobody inside. My clothes hung normally. The small window in the back wall of the closet was open. I had forgotten it was there. It was barely large enough for a person to fit through, and it had been painted shut for years. Now it stood wide open. Wet dirt covered the floor beneath it. There were footprints in the dirt, bare human footprints. They led out of the closet and stopped beside my bed. No footprints led toward the bedroom door. Whatever had come through that window had already been inside the room with me. I looked underneath the bed. At first, I saw only darkness. Then something moved. A pale face slowly appeared beneath the bed frame. It was my face. It stared back at me with its cheek pressed against the floor. Its eyes were wide. Its mouth was stretched into a smile. I screamed and swung the bat. The face disappeared beneath the bed before I hit it. Something crawled rapidly toward the other side. I jumped onto the mattress and struck downward again and again. The dispatcher was shouting through the phone. The bedroom door shook as something hit it from the hallway. The desk slid several inches. I ran to the window again. I had no choice. I opened it, climbed onto the ledge, and lowered myself onto the porch roof. As soon as my feet touched the roof, the bedroom door burst open behind me. I did not look back. I slid down the shingles, caught the edge, and dropped into the backyard. The fall knocked the air out of me. My ankle twisted beneath my weight, but I forced myself to stand. The people at the edge of the woods were gone. The backyard was empty. I ran toward our neighbor's house. As I reached the side of our home, someone called to me from the upstairs window. "Daniel." I looked up. My mother was leaning out of my bedroom window. Her face was brightly lit by the room behind her. For a fraction of a second, she looked normal. Then her smile widened, far wider than a human mouth should be able to stretch. She raised my phone to her ear. Only then did I realize I was no longer holding it. The call to the dispatcher was still connected. I could hear the dispatcher's distant voice coming from the phone in the thing's hand. "You forgot this," it said. Then it dropped the phone. It landed in the grass beside me. The screen shattered. I ran. Our nearest neighbors were an older couple named the Hensons. I reached their porch and began pounding on the door. Mr. Henson answered with a handgun in his hand. I must have looked insane. I was barefoot, covered in dirt, and barely able to stand on my ankle. I told him there was someone inside our house. He pulled me inside and locked the door. His wife called the police again. While we waited, I looked through their living room window toward my house. Every light was on. The upstairs windows, the kitchen, the basement, even the attic window, although there was no working light in the attic. Figures moved behind the curtains, not one person, several. They passed from room to room. Some were tall, others moved close to the floor. Mrs. Henson closed the curtains after she saw them. The police arrived less than 5 minutes later. 3 officers entered our house. They found nobody. No broken doors, no damaged windows, no footprints in my closet. The desk was still in front of my bedroom door, but the door itself was closed and locked from the inside. They had to force it open. My room was empty. The small closet window was painted shut. There was no dirt on the floor. The only damage was the broken screen on my phone, which they found outside. One officer suggested I had experienced a panic attack. Another thought someone might have entered the house and escaped before they arrived. Neither could explain the people Mr. and Mrs. Henson had seen moving behind the windows. My mother came home around 1 in the morning. The police checked her identification before allowing her near me. Even then, I could barely look at her. She was wearing the same blue coat, carrying the same red bag. But her real bag was heavy. When she dropped it on the Henson's floor, I heard the familiar sound of containers and folders shifting inside. She cried when she saw me. The thing in our house had never cried. We stayed at my sister's apartment for several weeks. My mother eventually sold the house. She never told the buyers what happened. There was nothing she could have put on a disclosure form anyway. No police report ever described an intruder. No physical evidence existed. For a long time, I convinced myself that it was over. Then, about 6 months later, my sister sent me a photograph. She had been looking through images from our father's old phone. The photograph was taken during Christmas dinner in 2018. My mother, my sister, and I were sitting at the dining room table. My father had taken the picture from the kitchen. None of us had noticed anything unusual at the time. But in the dark hallway behind my mother, someone was standing at the bottom of the stairs. A woman in a blue coat. Her face was hidden in shadow. She was watching us. Last year, I moved into an apartment in Ohio. I live alone now. The building is new. There are security cameras in every hallway, and my apartment is on the 5th floor. For the first few months, nothing happened. Then one night, at exactly 11:06, someone knocked on my door. 3 quiet taps. I checked the camera. My mother was standing in the hallway. She wore her blue winter coat and carried her red work bag. She looked directly into the camera. Then she smiled. I called my mother immediately. She answered from her home in Pennsylvania. While I was speaking to her, the woman outside my door raised her phone. Through the camera's microphone, I heard it begin to ring. The ringtone was coming from inside the red bag. The woman reached into it and removed a phone. She looked down at the screen. Then she answered, and my own voice came through the other end. "Mom?" it said.